I'm Anshul Vora. As the fight to recapture Mosul began, attacks in the Afghanistan region of South Asia are increasingly being claimed by ISIS. But is it ISIS or ISK, Islamic State Khorasan? And what is it? Even Bangladesh and the Maldives are concerned. India too isn't ignoring the threat. We will be discussing that, but first the headlines. 3 Indian soldiers killed by Pakistan, one of them mutilated near the line of control. Indian Army says retribution will be heavy for this cowardly act. The Indian Prime Minister calls for public opinion on demonetization on his app. The opposition kicks up a storm, says why is the Indian Prime Minister making public appeals without responding in the Parliament? ISIS in South Asia, a fad or the future of terror? Special report on reality of ISIS in the region. Is it just a brand name in the world of terror that's catching up, or is the group expanding from the Arab world to the Khorasan? President-elect Donald Trump unveils plans for his first 100 days in office, vows to quit Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal on the very first day at the Oval Office. Well, Conservatives hail in Europe too. Sarkozy is out of the presidential race. The weekend, Murky says will fight for a 4th term. Over the last 12 months, there have been at least 12 attacks in Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan that have been claimed by the terror group ISIS. India fears at least 60 Indians have gone to join ISIS in areas that are controlled by the terror group. But a major portion of these attacks have taken place in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Pakistan, of course, is the hub of terrorism in South Asia, Afghanistan a victim. The question, is the shift from the Arab world to South Asia imminent, or it's just a brand name that's gaining popularity amongst terror groups that already exist? Taha Siddiqui sent this report from Pakistan.
The Islamic State group has claimed 2 recent deadly terror strikes in Pakistan. The attacks on a police academy and a Sufi shrine killed more than 100 people. Just last week, police in Lahore claimed to have busted an Islamic State recruitment cell. But does the Islamic State have any real presence in Pakistan? Intelligence experts believe that splinter groups of the Taliban movement are using the name of Islamic State to attract global attention.
Basic objective of IS, which they formed in 2004, Zarqawi and other people, their main focus is basically the Arab countries, and they want to expand Khilafat to the Arab world. They have no interest in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the second thing, that IS won't be able to operate here in Pakistan and Afghanistan because they are anti-Al-Qaeda and even Afghan Taliban.
Many Pakistanis have also gone to join the fight in Iraq and Syria, and some of Pakistan's religious groups also share the same ideology as that of Islamic State group, which can help the group penetrate easily.
The ideology, you know, it is already here. The ideology of Al-Qaeda, TTP, many even religious parties, it is the same. They are already helping. You know, they have been helping TTP, they have been helping Al-Qaeda.
With Islamic State group on the retreat in the Middle East, many fear that the lawless tribal belt between Pakistan and Afghanistan may serve as a refuge for the group. With the recent terror attacks claimed by the Islamic State, experts believe that Pakistan will see a lot more bloodshed in the coming days given the group's tactics. This is Taha Siddiqui with cameraman Rao Bilal reporting for Wion from Islamabad.
Now, even though officials in these countries still deny the presence of ISIS in the subcontinent, the ISIS has claimed a number of attacks in South Asia. Let's look at the major ISIS attacks in South Asia. On January 13th, I beg your pardon, in 2016, ISIS, a militant of Khorasan province, attacked Pakistan's consulate in Jalalabad in Afghanistan, killing 9 people and injuring 12. On March 2nd this year, Indian consulate in Jalalabad attacked, 5 militants were killed and 9 people were injured. July 1st, gunmen detonated explosives at Holy Artisan Bakery Cafe in Dhaka and claimed that attack. 2 policemen and 20 hostages were killed. Security forces neutralized all the militants. October 24th, ISIS militants attacked a police training academy in Quetta, killing 61 and injuring 117 people. November 12th, bomb blast at a Sufi shrine in Pakistan killed at least 10, wounded 60. In Quetta, in Baluchistan, on November 21st, suicide bomb attack at Shia Mosque Bakirul Uloom in Kabul then killed at least 30 and injured 70 people. Now, these attacks have been claimed by the ISIS, but in most cases, the governments of these countries have denied ISIS's hand. We're going to be talking about which group essentially is operating in the AFPAC region, whether it is ISIS or whether it is groups that claim claim their allegiance to ISIS. We're going to come to that in a bit, but first let me introduce our panel. Sushant Sareen, Strategic Affairs Expert, is joining us from New Delhi. We also have our guest from Afghanistan, I believe, a senior journalist who's joining us via London today, though. Mr. Noori, Deputy Director of Afghanistan Journalist Centre, is joining us as well. In a short while from now, we'd also be joined by our guest from Pakistan. And later from Pakistan, we'll have Ijaz Khan, Professor at the Department of International Relations in University of Peshawar. And a little while later, we'll also have a Strategic Affairs expert from Bangladesh. To begin with, let me go to Sushant Sareen. Sushant, in India, what we hear about ISIS is that essentially the fear is of ISIS's ideology. So a lot of work that the intelligence agencies in collaboration with state governments have been doing is of ensuring that there is some sort of a counter campaign when it comes to ISIS's ideology. And India feels that at least 60 Indians are in ISIS controlled areas. They've gone there because they want to join ISIS. How real is this threat when we look at India? And after that, I'll move to my guest from Afghanistan.
Anjal, of course, it's a very real threat. We cannot expect that India will remain cut off from a phenomena which is sweeping Muslim societies around the world. India is not some kind of an island, and there's nothing so unique about India that this phenomena will not touch Indian shores. In fact, it has. That is one part of the problem. The second part of the problem is that we are focusing just too much on a particular organization. I agree that that organization has managed to make major waves around the world, has managed to seduce and attract a lot of young people with their depraved kind of logic. But the problem is not so much the organization. When we, in your introduction, you're talking about what's happening in Afghanistan and what's happening in Pakistan. The fact of the matter is, what is the difference between Taliban and the ISIS? What do the ISIS do which the Taliban doesn't? It's basically a mutation of the same phenomena, at least as far as Afghanistan and Pakistan is concerned. And in Pakistan, of course, I don't know what is a bigger threat as far as India is concerned, whether it's the ISIS or it's the ISI. So those are very real issues which we are facing. And more so because there is a lot of overlapping of all these groups. The same ISI which supports groups like the Haqqanis and the others also have links with the Al-Qaeda and with the Taliban. Also, their own breakaway groups have gone and made common cause or set up splinter factions of the IS. So
Absolutely.
In a manner of speaking, what we might see in the region in the months ahead is a sort of an internecine warfare. It's a wrong word to use, but it's internecine in an ideological sense between, say, the Taliban and the IS, and a struggle for power. Of course, that will have an impact in India as well, but I think it's the...
Right, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to emphasize how much I agree with you and a lot of intellectuals in South Asia as well. ISI supported groups, and now you have ISIS in the picture. They share ideology, but they're now also helping out each other. Because of ISIS, now there is Islamic State Khorasan. So ISI, ISIS, ISK. What is Islamic State Khorasan? I beg your pardon. Let's pull that information up. ISIS groups apparently... Islamic State Khorasan is a group that is in the Spingar mountain region. ISIS united AfPak groups and formed Islamic State Khorasan since 2014. ISIS lured AfPak terror groups, and ISIS is seen it's essentially comprised of breakaway factions of the TTP, of Lashkar-e-Jhangvi faction, and we also believe that during Zarb-e-Azb, Pakistan pushed terrorists into Afghanistan. This is something that the CEO of Afghanistan, Dr. Abdullah has told me on record. Terror groups took shelter in Spingar mountain region in Afghanistan. This is in the border area of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Lashkar-e-Islam, a group that's based in this area, supported such terror groups. All right, let me go to our Afghan guest. Dr. Noori is joining us from London. He is the Deputy Director of Afghanistan Journalist Centre. Thanks, Mr. Noori, for talking to Wion this evening. I'd like to get a sense from you. I was in Afghanistan about a year and a half ago, and then after that as well. And what I heard constantly was people would say it's just a different flag, but the groups are still similar. They talk about how they weren't sure whether ISIS really was there in Afghanistan or no. And this is the time when, this is just a week after that attack on a bank in Jalalabad had happened. Now, the Afghanistan Analyst Network has published a very detailed report about how ISK took roots there. And it talks about how when the militants were being pushed out by Pakistan from those areas, these are the people along with their families. They found space in the districts in Spingar Mountains. They were then given supports by local elements there. And these are the people who have essentially formed this Islamic State Khorasan.
Good evening. I still, in a sense, I agree with most of the people saying still that the ISIS is a different flag, because the ISIS in Afghanistan was, in a sense, sent by ISI when the Afghan government were about to reach a peace agreement with the Taliban. Remember, we have a long border issue with Pakistan, the Durand line. That's 1 week of a politics of the Afghan government as well, that they still don't recognize this border as an official border, because anything that happens until attack area, the Afghan government thinks, okay, those are the brothers, Pashtun brothers of ours on the other side of the border, so let's do nothing about it. And this is where the Taliban and the ISI supports the Taliban and the groups like ISIS. When we were about to reach an agreement with the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, the Pakistani wanted to create a new group called ISIS. Basically, it was they lowered their white flag and they raised the black flag. And what they did was they trained them to be a bit more brutal and disrespect the culture. The Taliban and the ISIS, or ISK as yours referred to, is the same thing, that these are supported by ISI. They're just there to create chaos in Afghanistan and weaken the Afghan government until we don't recognize borderline, that's the current border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. This tension will continue under different names. Just pretend that today we get rid of ISIS and Taliban. Tomorrow, ISI will create another group to just get this tension going on. And it's true that when they conducted the big operation in Waziristan, most of these people fled to Afghanistan and came to Afghanistan with their families. There were actually documentaries that produced, and I was involved in one of them, the prisons of ISIL. They are speaking Punjabi. So they are just the local groups that create, announce allegiance to ISIL, but they are not exactly the same ISIL as in Middle East.
Right, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, Noori. Let me go to Sushant Sareen with us. Sushant, so our Afghan guest is saying that essentially the group that is operating in Afghanistan is yet another one that's been created by the ISI. And frankly, there is really no proof that exists to link the ISK in a structured, financial manner with ISIS in the Arab world. What do you think is at play here?
You know, I think the truth is rather murky. we have a tendency for looking at things in black and white. And as Mr. Noori said, in fact, a lot of what he said, I'm in complete agreement with him, because my own sense is also that the emergence of the IS in a kind of a somewhat structured manner in Afghanistan was essentially an ISI, construct. The reason being that the ISI also wanted to use the threat of IS internationally to gain support for pushing the Taliban cause. That was another factor which was at work. But then, because things are very murky, what has also happened is many of these groups have their own agenda as well. Let me give you another instance of how the ISI is involved in some of these groups. You mentioned Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. We know it for a fact that in Balochistan, especially in the area where you speak about Khuzdar and the attack on the Sufi shrine out there, or in that entire belt, in the Baloch belt, the ISI has actually been sponsoring death squads which owe allegiance or which are very closely involved with the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, and which have also been carrying out Shia massacres in Quetta and other parts of Balochistan. So it's a rather murky kind of a thing. It's the same ISI which used this fellow who was a Sunni extremist, Malik Ishaq and his bunch, to intercede on behalf of the Pakistani state during a couple of hostage situations, including the hostage situation in the general headquarters in 2009, I believe, if I get the date correct. So they have been using these fellows, and the day they felt that Malik Ishaq was probably trying to cut loose and do his own thing, they bumped him off in a very clear incident of extrajudicial killing. So much for human rights Pakistani style. So the fact is that because of this murkiness, these are constantly shifting alliances. The same groups, sometimes because they want to make a strong point or they have a certain negotiation to do, they tend to switch allegiance from the Afghan Taliban to the IS. Sometimes they switch back from the IS to the Afghan Taliban. But frankly, the DNA of all these groups is the same. They might come under different labels, but essentially they are preaching the same pernicious ideology. They are practicing the same sort of barbarism and savagery,
right,
and
so
they are killing innocents.
Absolutely. Let me go to Noori.
Places like.
Let me go to Mr. Noori. Mr. Noori, there was at least some sort of a word that now, when both Afghanistan and Pakistan are facing the same enemy, that being ISIS or ISK, the two countries could bridge the differences and come together and work against terrorism together as a joint force.
Well, this is another style of Pakistani game playing. When it comes closer to the winter time, when there's not the season of fighting, this is the season of training and logistically providing things. They come forward with lots of deals, let's make peace deal, let's go do this one negotiation. You have remembered, for the past at least 2 years, we have been coming closer to a deal more than 3 times. But all of them started in the winter time. As soon as the summer or even the spring began, the deals would collapse, the fighting would do. They just want to buy time to create a group to provide them with support and logistics. As soon as they are well equipped, they will do the same thing that happened. Like same as yesterday's event, Now, because they've tried to very hard to convince the people to fight against the government, saying that the government is, say, pro-Westerns, they are not believers and all these things.
Mr. Noori, may I come in, please, sir? I understand what you're saying, but when that Jalalabad attack had happened, I very clearly remember Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani coming on the air. He told the press there that it was ISIS attack. He spoke about the fear of the ISIS, and a short while after that he was in India, and then again I asked him about what's going on as far as the ISIS is concerned, and he spoke about the prophecies, quote unquote, that the radical Islamists talk about of Khurasan. Why do you think Ashraf Ghani is then backing the theory that it is ISIS?
They have a good reason for that, because Ashraf Ghani wants to make peace deal with the Taliban. Same as Karzai called the Taliban brother to bring them closer to the negotiation table. Now, by labeling any attack that happens with the ISIS, he wants to, in a sense, show that the Taliban, we are getting closer in good terms with the Taliban. At least he wants to bring the Taliban closer to the peace negotiation table. By that, he put any blame that's there on the ISIS. And then, like yesterday's event, who has seen that ISIS was in Afghanistan and even in Kabul? Did they claim the biggest two attacks? Because now they just switched the focus from more of radicalism to now creating problems within the different religious sector groups. Now they're targeting more Shiites to create a tension between Shiite and Sunni. But luckily, Afghanistan has lived in harmony. Both religions, both sectors of the religion lived in peace together. And literally speaking, we are not going to fall into these traps. But unfortunately, our politicians are so much drawn into two things, as I mentioned at the very beginning. One is, this bigger Pashtunistan area that, what we call it Lara Ubar, which means inside and outside Pashtuns are together, while in reality it's not. Another thing is, that they want to bring the Taliban closer to them by calling them brothers, by calling them political oppositions. They want to separate them or distance them from Pakistan.
Point taken, point taken. I want to talk about what the view of the radical Islamists is. Why are some of the intellectuals here concerned? Hussein Haqqani, a Pakistani diplomat, a former Pakistani diplomat rather, has also spoken at length about these prophecies, so to say. Let's pull up that information for our viewers. One of them is Ghazwa-e-Hind and the other one is how the Mahdi would emerge from Khurasan. An army with black flags would emerge from Khurasan to help the Mahdi establish his caliphate at Makkah. The other theory is that radical Islamists invoke the Hadith to prophesize a great battle in India between true believers and unbelievers before the end of times. These references in the Hadith to the Ghazwa-e-Hind, Battle of India, in many ways do infuse South Asia with importance as a battleground in the efforts to create an Islamic caliphate. Now, when you talk about Khorasan, essentially you're talking about, historically, if you look at it, some of the scholars have looked at it as the region, have looked at it as Hindu Kush that divides Khorasan from Hindustan. This is something that Ashraf Ghani also spoke about, that essentially this is at the very it makes the very roots of the ideology also of the ISIS, and that is why he fears that ISIS may actually exist in Afghanistan. I want to get Sushant Sareen back in on this Ghazwa-e-Hind thought. Sushant, you and I, we've spoken to a lot of diplomats, a lot of thinkers also in India, and we hear this, that this essentially is their fear, that this ideology will catch on, and if it does, then there will be a huge problem for India as well. Right now, there's more trouble in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but it could come to India as well.
No, you see, it's a no-brainer that it will come into India. In fact, Anjal, this is a kind of an ideology, if you will, or it's the kind of thinking or prophecies or legends which are not recent. These are almost 200, 250 years old. It's Ranjit Singh, when he was fighting the so-called Hindustani fanatics who had gone from UP and Bihar and what was then CP under the Brit Raj, who had gone and fought in the same places, Swat and all these areas against Ranjit Singh's army. That was part of what was Ghazwa-e-Hind. So these theories and these prophecies have been around for hundreds of years. So there's nothing new in that. That is one issue. The bigger problem to my mind is that while I agree that there is a lot of intermingling between the IS and the ISI, there is also an IS factor which exists. We've seen that happen in India. We are seeing that happen in Pakistan, and it will obviously manifest itself in Afghanistan. The biggest fear which I have is that when the Americans and the Russians and all of them go and bomb the hell out of these fellows in Iraq and Syria and that region, where will those fellows go? They are not all going to die. My fear is that a lot of those fellows are going to make a beeline for Afghanistan, which in a sense will re-emerge as a sort of safe haven, especially if the Americans and the rest of the West loses interest in Afghanistan and they start pulling out from Afghanistan. That is when all hell will break loose in this region, because all these desperados, just as they came into this region in the 80s and early 90s and made Afghanistan the terror central of the world, that is something which could happen once again. And these two clever by half games which the Pakistanis keep playing with all their neighbors and with themselves are going to bite them really badly if this is what actually transpires. And there is no reason to believe that this will not happen. We are already seeing some manifestations of that, of some of these groups coming back, because a lot of these fighters, according to some Pakistani reports, almost 600 to 1,000 people from these areas, from the Pakistani areas, have gone and joined up with IS ranks in Syria and Iraq.
Right.
There are training camps out there, although not necessarily IS, but with some of the other groups like Jabhat-ul Nusra and some of these other groups.
You know what's interesting, Sushant, is that, and I've spoken to some of the people who are essentially bringing the Indian boys back, and some of these members of our agencies went to Turkey. They brought an Indian back, and along with that they had reports of Pakistanis being there too. There is a Pakistani handler in Turkey that is essentially trying to send South Asians to Syrian territories. This intelligence has been shared with Turkey, and not just that, Pakistanis themselves are sitting in Turkey in order to go to Syria. So Pakistan, as always, is playing with fire. It's a mystery to the rest of the world as to why they continue to do that. Why do they not fear the obvious situation that they would land in if nobody else?
Anchal, you also have a madman in Syria. You also have a madman in Syria, in Erdogan, who has also been playing with fire. So sometimes he panders to the Islamic State, he paves the way for them, he paves the way for their recruits and all sorts of things. Then one fine day, you know, the madman suddenly gets an idea that no, he must switch over and try and do something else. So, and he and his closeness to the Pakistanis is a given. So that the fact that these fellows are hand in glove is not something that you can rule out just like that. So there are reasons to believe that there could be some kind of cooperation also between the Turks, because they've played a very murky role, and the Turks are going to suffer the same fate which some of the Pakistanis have suffered. And all these suicide bombings and other things which are happening in Turkey is actually just desserts for this crazy guy whom the Turks have imposed upon themselves. He thinks he's some kind of a new Ottoman caliph or some kind of a new Khalifa of his own right, but obviously he is also playing with fire. So essentially it's pernicious policies of state coupled with certain madmen who are ruling over these countries, which are only aggravating the problem rather than sorting it out.
State-sponsored terrorism, whether, as you're saying, you're talking about Turkey pushing in ISIS elements within Syria and Iraq, and many journalists, one of them including Patrick Coburn of The Independent, have written at quite some length about it. Or Pakistan in this case. I mean, they have to understand that perhaps that's not the solution, and they cannot be using state-sponsored terrorism as a tool to meet their desires, as it were. Let me go to Nouri again. You've been talking at great length about what Pakistan's doing wrong, and ISK or ISIS in Afghanistan is essentially a construction of the ISI. But a lot of people, including the Afghanistan Analyst Network's members, have spoken about how this has also been perhaps a plan of the NDS, which is the intelligence agency in Afghanistan, to break away the TTP, use its members at ISK in order to attack Pakistan back. What do you have to say about that? Because there have been several reports that essentially the NDS collaborated with these people who were in Spingar Mountains, Pashtuns from Pakistan, to use them against Pakistan, use TTP against Pakistan.
What I would see is this is again another game of eyesight to blame because
but there have been attacks against Pakistan as well, Nouri.
That's true, because if you look at the bigger picture, Afghanistan unfortunately has been the battleground of the proxy wars between India and Pakistan. The fact that the Pakistanis are attacking us even more under President Ghani is because our ties with India became more close, and we couldn't get the balance between the two countries. We couldn't form the best relationship with both countries at the same level. So the closer we get to India, the more angry the Pakistan will become. The closer we get to Pakistan, of course, India will be not happy about that one. Same is true when it comes to recent attacks about even, again, at the regional picture, bigger picture, Saudi and Iran, the Shiite and Sunnis. That's how the game is played. But when it comes to the blame on NDS, what the Pakistanis do is, they claim that NDS has been supporting some elements of Indian intelligence in Afghanistan in order to provide funding and logistics for the separatists of Baluchistan. So anything that happens within that region, they simply claim that one. But so far, they haven't provided any proof for any of these attacks that the people who were after this. In fact, President Ghani, in one of his interviews with Geo TV in Pakistan, clearly mentioned that if there is any proof provided to us, while for our end, we have captured people with Pakistani ID cards, we have provided details of that one, we have traced the phone calls of these people within Pakistan. So there are lots of proofs, and even recently, as you can see, Pakistan has been marginalized. Not only by that, the SAARC, most of the countries of the SAARC members boycotted participating in that one simply because Pakistan is now coming, in a sense,
right. Nuri, I get your point. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I do wish that we can very soon connect to a guest from Pakistan, because both my guests are indulging in a lot of, I believe Meher Tarar is with us. Meher, we can always rely on you. Thanks very much. She's joining us on the phone line. We'll try and soon get her on Skype. Meher, essentially we have an Indian guest and an Afghan guest, and an Afghan guest is saying that there is no ISIS in Afghanistan, Pakistan and the AfPak region. The attacks that are happening in Afghanistan are not by Islamic State Khorasan. It is essentially by ISI. ISK, this group has again been formed on the directions of the ISI. As a Pakistani journalist, as a Pakistani, what are you picking up from your sources in the political circles, in the military circles in Pakistan?
This is the first time I've heard something like this. You see, for the newspaper that I write for, people from all over the world write for that newspaper. For instance, we have Indians writing for the newspaper. And I've never heard anyone say something as absurd as what you just quoted your guest as saying. I have never denied the existence of militant groups in Pakistan, and I never will. But for these people to say that things, actions, terrorist acts that have been claimed by ISIS are also perpetrated by Pakistanis, while there have been terrorist attacks in Pakistan, apparently, allegedly by ISIS. So, I mean, how does this even make sense? Even the last terrorist attack in Quetta, it was ostensibly ISIS took claim for that. Not that I believe, or not that any rational person believes that there are a lot of ISIS people, operatives in Afghanistan or Pakistan, but to say that none of them exist and everything that is happening in Afghanistan, which is, connected to ISIS, is being done by Pakistanis, it's just...
Meher, stay with us. Let me take that to our guest, our Afghan guest, Mr. Noori, who's joining us from London, actually. But he's the director of the Journalist Center of Afghanistan. Noori, how would you respond to what Ms. Tarar is saying? She's saying there have been several attacks, and recently massive attacks. Many people in Pakistan have been killed, and ISIS has claimed responsibility. So on what basis are you saying that ISK or ISIS in Afghanistan is also the creation of the ISI?
Well, you remember that there's at least, speaking of the Taliban, now we have at least 3 groups of Taliban. And the Pakistanis also have, they have this cherry-picking style of, good and bad terrorists. That's what it is. What I'm saying is, the creation of a group under the name of ISIS in Afghanistan is a recipe of ISI.
Then why are they attacking Pakistan? Why have there been attacks on a police academy in Quetta? Why have so many of the Pakistanis been killed? You saying ISI is killing its own soldiers?
No, but what I told you, they have this ideology of, good and bad terrorists. So the one who are fighting us, they are being supported by them. And of course, the more you create these radical groups, they will eventually turn against you. Same as the Taliban. They have Tehrik-e-Taliban in Pakistan, but they never go after Haqqani because Haqqani is targeting Afghans, not the Pakistani. But they go against the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan who are against them.
I get your point.
There could be a group of ISIS who are against Pakistani. But my point was, the ISIS inside Afghanistan is a creation of Pakistan. I'm not talking about the ISIS, whether there is a group or such a thing in Pakistan against the Pakistani
Understood. Point taken. Point taken. I think Sushant Sareen wants to react to what either what Mr. Noori or what Meher Tarar has said. Sushant, go ahead.
No, the first thing I want to say is, this whole business of the Pakistani logic that, the NDS is supporting some of these groups to attack Pakistan. I haven't heard a more stupid thing from the Pakistanis. I've heard plenty of stupid things from them. Let me give you, it's the same Pakistanis who say that somebody like Ashraf Ghani is as good as the mayor of Kabul, or like Hamid Karzai was the mayor of Kabul, that their writ does not extend all over the country. Then they say that the NDS, obviously if the writ of the president or the government of Afghanistan does not extend all over the country, then you expect that the NDS is that powerful that it can actually motivate these people and turn them around and turn them against the Pakistanis? How ridiculous is that? So it just doesn't make sense. There is no logic in that argument. That is one. The second thing is, I think I don't blame Meher Tarar and, for the kind of disingenuity which he is showing out here. Isn't it true that when the Hazaras were being butchered in Quetta, for almost 4 years or 5 years, there was not a single finger which the Pakistani security establishment lifted to get around these people, the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi fellows? Isn't it true that the two most dangerous of the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi terrorists who were in the custody of the Pakistani army were allowed to escape from the
Sushant,
Quetta
let's get Meher to react. Sushant, let's get Meher to react.
Isn't it true that Malik Ishaq was working for the government of Pakistan for a fair bit of time and used to intercede on behalf of the army and others on a range of issues, including
Let's get Ms. Tarar to react. I believe your question is to her.
I can give you chapter and verse, so I don't agree with what she says.
Meher, would you like to come in and react?
No, incidentally, Malik Ishaq was killed by Pakistan government, so I don't see the point of whatever Mr. Sareen is trying to put across. The problem,
yeah, but he wasn't a negotiator for the Pakistan government.
It's absolute. The problem is when you start to speak about Pakistan, it's so linear, it's so biased, it's so one-sided that even people on your own panel, if they have any sense, would see that you don't see two sides of any picture, that is who you are. I've been on a number of debates, so you know disrespect to you. This is what you believe about Pakistan, and this is how you would like to look at it. Unlike you, I have the moral courage to look at all the ills in my country, starting from blasphemy law to what has happened to Hazaras, what happens to Shias, what happens to Ahmadis. We look at everything, and it's very painful for us to see what's happening in our country. But yes, we do believe that a lot has been done against them, and a lot will be done. If Afghanistan, a country that has been in turmoil for the last more than 30 years, if you're going to blame everything that is happening in Afghanistan on Pakistan, I don't think anything is going to come out of that. A lot of Afghans, a lot of Pakistanis, a lot of Indians.
So who supported the Quetta Shura? Where were the Taliban based for all these 15 years?
There are people. Taliban.
Where are the Taliban based? Please let us know.
Yeah, that's true.
Since you are so sure of how pure your country is.
No, Sushant,
since you are so
be fair
sure
to
that
her.
your country has no hand in sponsoring terrorism in Afghanistan or in Kashmir.
Okay.
No, please, this is the
Sushant, I'll
worst
request
form of
you to
dissemble.
please, let's not make it an argument.
This is utter dissemble.
Meher, Sushant, let's please not make it an argument.
Interrupt me when I'm speaking, when you have said everything that you wanted to say about anything and everything that happens in Afghanistan is not Pakistan's problem. Taliban, good or bad, however Pakistan looked at them, Taliban have always been Afghans. Yes, there is a Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, people who
A lot of Taliban are Pakistan too, Meher. There I'll have to disagree with you. I'm sorry to my panelists. I have to take a break now. And let's not make it an argument. We are all getting time here to put our perspective forward. Sushant, I think Meher Tara did also speak of the problems in Pakistan, and she is in that sense one Pakistani, so I think we can just perhaps go a little easy on her. And Meher, certainly you'd agree that a lot of Taliban are Pakistanis too. On that note, let's take a break. We will continue this discussion. We'll also have a guest joining us from Bangladesh. Stay with us.